The Jellison podcast is presented by Indy Lumberjack. They proudly offer reasonable rates, safe, top quality, courteous, efficient service. Let Indy Lumberjack help you reach your goal of maintaining beautiful and safe trees. They're by far the best in the business. You can get a free quote on indylumberjack.com or email indylumberjack@gmail.com for inquiries. Again, get a free quote on indylumberjack.com. What's up, everyone? We're back with another episode of the Jellison podcast, and today I have Derek Schultz. Derek, how you doing?
What's up, Dub? How are you, man? I'm excited. I've wanted to be on the show for a long time, and I've been blowing up your phone constantly about it. And then finally you got back to me a couple of weeks ago and gave me a date because I know you're scheduling like months in advance now. So really appreciate the invite.
No, I've been wanting to have you on for a long time. I remember, I don't know if you remember this, but I emailed you when you guys did your preview show at Purdue prior to the last basketball season. And I was going to try to come in and try to I don't even know what my motive was or what I was trying to accomplish, but I emailed you. It said something like, if there's an internship opportunity, or I wanted you to come on the podcast, and then we kind of lost touch. And then we got back in touch, and I had to cancel the last time we were supposed to have you on. But now we finally did have you on. I was talking to my dad about this earlier. Ever since I could remember, I was listening to Derek and Schultz, or Query and Schultz on the radio, going to and from the practice and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it's a little surreal to have you on.
Oh, well, that's awesome. That makes me feel really good. Jake and I had a good run. 8.5 years. Radio is kind of like dog years. So we almost made it into middle AARP age for 8.5 years times 7. I'm an IU grad, so I'm not going to try to do math on that, but it's up in the 60s in dog years. But the highlight of the year for me, no joke, was doing that show. We also came up for football, so we do the football camp in August, and then we do basketball around Halloween, November, right when they were starting the exhibition season. And the highlight of the year for us was it was a closed practice, so there's no there. Eddie Hazel and the team and the support staff, so like Elliot Bloom and the trainers and people like that. And it's like nothing else, man, to get a glimpse kind of behind the curtain to see what all goes into do on a regular basis and what they put their bodies through, and also just the hilarity that is Matt Painter, because he really is, he's a character for sure, and he's a genuine guy, and you get him at face value, so you get exactly what you're supposed to get. There's no show. And I've always kind of appreciated that about him. I mean, he could have told us to go pound sand. You know what I mean? Hey, we're your radio fill in Indy, and we want to be there for a close practice. There are a lot of coaches that there is no way they would ever let anybody in media-wise to a close practice. So the fact that he did that I think we did it for 6 years, if I remember right, was awesome and truly a highlight of my time there.
Mm-hmm. I've had the honor of having Coach Painter on the podcast. One of the best dudes I've ever talked to. Is one of my favorite ones to do. I can appreciate how you say you can just tell he's authentic in literally everything he does. I think he's the best coach in the country, but obviously I'm a little biased as a lifelong Purdue fan and a current Purdue student. So what have you been doing since obviously your time with Query and Schultz on the radio has ended, and now you guys are doing a new show through ISC Network. So talk a little bit about that and what you've been doing since your time on the radio ended.
Yeah, it was tough. In January, we were part of iHeart's nationwide reduction in force, and they cut about 1,000 jobs, particularly in middle markets and with talk and sports stations. So obviously, Indianapolis sports talk kind of fell right into that wheelhouse, and we were cut. We lost 6 other people in our building that day. They wiped out the whole in Jacksonville, Des Moines. There were a couple of other places that everybody, they just said bye. And, it is what it is. When you sign up for radio, especially corporate radio, and iHeart is the corporate radio, that piano that's hanging on the wire over your head, it could fall. So, but it's still sudden and it still sucks. You know what I mean? Like there's just no other, anybody that's listening to this that has been laid off before, it sucks. There's just no other way to put it. So for a couple of weeks, I just tried to kind of like mentally recalibrate. I have a young son who's, he'll be 4 in February. My wife is an overnight nurse. And then when I was starting to get kind of back on the job market again, COVID hit. So my wife was on the COVID unit hospital downtown. And so we basically were quarantined and isolated for the better part of 12 weeks, about 10 to 12 weeks, something like that. And it was tough. Worried about my future, you know, is my career over and everything like that, but also just with the real life stuff going on of, you know, health and not getting to see my son in any human contact at all. So it was difficult. We also had a non-compete, which is fairly common in radio, where when you sign your contract, you agree to not appear in the market for 6 months. Luckily for me, I had kind of a grandfathered in agreement with the Star to do a podcast with Greg Doyle, which we had actually started before the 2019 football season. So August of 19. So we were a couple of months into when the layoff happened. So I was allowed to continue that, but literally that was the only thing I was allowed to do. Like even something like this, like coming on a podcast, technically if they wanted to, they could come after my severance and all of that other stuff, because I'm not supposed to do any media like that. So that was hard. It was hard to sit out because, you know, even before Query and Schultz, I had hosted a show on a much smaller station, the old ESPN affiliate in Indy 950 with Greg Rakestraw, who I think a lot of people, if you listen to Sports Radio in Indianapolis, you'll recognize that name. He does the Colts pre and post forever. And so I was on the air every single day. I didn't have a non-compete at my previous spot. I was on the air every single day for 12 years, and you know, weekday. So to not have that microphone and that platform and not even be like the next week, you know what I mean? We would have launched that immediately if we were allowed to do that, but we weren't. So, you know, kind of long-winded here. I tried to stay active. I actually got a part-time job and Amazon out of the house. And that's been oddly kind of a rewarding experience for me. I haven't had a part-time job since I was your age, since I was in college. So I didn't really know what I was signing up for, but I like to work. I need. And even though I was collecting severance and all of that, I just couldn't sit around and do nothing. You know what I mean? Like I had to feel like I was being productive. So I had been doing that for 9 months. Actually, my last day, because I do have some full-time career news that I can't tell you, but I will announce. Sorry to tease that out. Coming up soon. I very recently last week accepted an offer to and I'll let everybody know about that when the time comes. But so I've been doing the Amazon and then all the freelance stuff. So once the non-compete expired at the end of August, all the freelance stuff, the podcast with Greg, which I started, Indy Monthly, which has been a lot of fun. He asked me to kind of come aboard and write whenever you feel like it, which is great because I feel no pressure at all. And then, of course, the Query and Schultz stuff, which we launched with ISC Sports Network. And we brought along a lot of our longtime loyal advertisers from the and got them involved. So it's only once a week, which doesn't, you know, totally scratch the itch for me, but at least we're out there and the show still lives. And, you know, that was just a great time in my life. That run with Jake, I moved in with my then girlfriend. We got engaged, we got married, we bought a house, we had a son. Like there's so many things that happened in my life during the 8.5 years that I was there. And to get to go to Final Fours and the Super Bowl and talk to amazing people, like heroes of mine and all of that, you know, Ice Cube came on the show, for God's sake. Like it's insane. Like you're trying to talk to Ice Cube, you know what I mean? Like to even like comprehend that stuff that you had the ability to do. So I was so thankful and all happy memories. The layoff sucks and all of that is true. And I had a difficult year. I'm not going to lie to you. But it's been nice to stay involved and I'm to the next chapter, which looks like it's going to come here very soon for me.
Well, I'm excited to hear that. Maybe if you can share it with me off the air, that'd be cool. But yeah, I mean, you guys were a staple in indie sports radio and radio in general. Like I said, like me and my dad listened to you every single day, going to and from baseball practice and stuff like that. But you kind of touched on something I wanted to ask was, what were some of your like most fond memories of your entire sports media career, whether that be going to a Final Four, things of that nature? And then who are a few people that you've either had on your show or have interviewed and you were kind of starstruck? I know you said Ice Cube, which is really dope.
Yeah, that was, it's weird. And I think you're going to come to understand this too, even early in your career. When you're in sports, like eventually it just kind of becomes, I mean, like, oh, hey, here's Matt Painter. Okay, it's normal. You're just having a conversation. But it's so weird because, Peyton Manning obviously is super famous, right? Yeah. But it doesn't feel that way because you stood at Peyton Manning. Whereas Ice Cube feels like famous, like, wow, I'm talking to Ice Cube. So there's just a little bit of a difference there. I'll answer the second part of your question first. By far my favorite interview, and this is, I grew up in southwestern Connecticut, which I understand that's weird to geographically identify which portion of Connecticut I'm from because it's a little thimble. But what I compare it to is it's a lot like the region is, where I grew up is to New York City what the region is to Chicago. So it's technically a different state, but you identify with that city. So we were so close to New York that I grew up a rabid Knicks fan. And this the Knicks and Pacers had their heyday. So when I was, 10, 12, 14, 16, all the way through high school, those years, I was rooting like hell for Anthony Mason and Charles Oakley and John Starks and Patrick Ewing and where everybody here in Indiana was, they hated all those guys. And I hated Reggie and I hated Rick Smits. Rick Smits always killed the Knicks. I hated Mark Jackson because he was, formerly a Knick and then, kind of like a trade. But during the Final Four in 2018, we went to 5 Final Fours because we had an affiliation with Westwood One and they would send us down there, which was awesome. And we did the show from Radio Row for 3 days. And we were in San Antonio, the last trip that we made to the Final Four, one of the guys that booked for Westwood One would kind of give us the rundown of who's going to be around and who do you want to have on. And he was like, well, I know we've got Coach Ewing coming in. And I just stopped and I was like, wait, Patrick Ewing's going to be here? And he's like, well, yeah. And I was like, please, can he come on? Can he come to the Indianapolis table? Please, can he come on the show? And he's like, oh yeah, it's wide open. I got a slot for you right here. So I remember I called my dad right away. We were walking from the convention center about, Ewing's going to be on the show tomorrow. And honestly didn't sleep much the night before because I was so excited about it because he was my Mickey Mantle. He was my hero. And I still have a poster of him. Not my house anymore because my wife doesn't let me put it up anymore, but I had one in my office from the one that hung in my childhood bedroom. It was a cheesy like 1985 poster where he's wearing really short shorts and it says Madison Square Garden. It's from like his second year in the league. And he came up and I talked to him and maintained my composure and we did a normal interview and all of that. But I did on the air. I told him, I can't put into words what your career means to me because it was the truth. And whereas I think I feel that Michael Jordan or Peyton Manning or somebody like that, I don't know if he hears that all the time, so that by far was the number one highlight. But, getting to talk to, I had the chance to interview Don Mattingly and I was early in my career when I was at 950. We had him on. He was the manager. I think was he with the Dodgers then? I'm trying to think of where he was. I think that's where he was. What?
That I would assume so. Hold on.
Yeah, I think that's where he was. But he came on the show. John Starks actually came on the show when Winning Time was released. I had John Starks on the show. those were personal favorites of mine. Also, a really cool thing that we got to do was the Reggie Wayne show for 3 seasons, where Reggie would come in person with us on Tuesdays, and what a great guy. And you knew that he was destined for. In the middle season there in 2013, as you might remember, he tore his ACL in the middle of the season. So he went down to Miami for a while to rehab, and most of the contact that and we would text back and forth. So, you know, when Reggie's coming, like it wasn't a lot of one-on-one contact, and that's generally how it is with players. And his agent said, it's okay. Reggie gives it his blessing. You want to just book other guys to fill in for the Reggie Wayne show. So we had Anthony Costanzo on one week. We had Donald Brown on one week. And through a connection at work, we actually got a hold of Andrew Luck and asked him, thinking that and host the Reggie Wayne show. And Luck goes, yeah, sure, I'll do it. So we have Andrew Luck coming that week. So literally the next day, it's Monday to start the week, and we're at the meeting. And I get a text from Reggie's agent. And he goes, hey, Reggie's back in town, and he wants to start doing the show again. So the show's tomorrow, and it's like, well, what are you going to do? You can't tell Reggie Wayne that he can't host the Reggie Wayne show, right? And I'm also not – I'm sure as hell not going to tell Andrew Luck, hey, thanks, but no thanks.
Mm-hmm.
So we asked Reggie if it was through his agent, if it's okay, hey, we already had Andrew booked in. Can you and Andrew come at the same time? And we were at George's Neighborhood Grill at 71st and Binford, and we took out the private room. We used to just do it in no crowd. We took out a private room. We were way over fire code. It was crazy. There was, you know, like 300 people in there, and it was insane. We had Reggie Wayne and Andrew Luck in there at the same time. So Luck's second season, and it was nuts. I mean, I felt like I was at a Beatles concert. So that was one of the personal highlights as well. But, you know, really more than anything else, man, that show, originally I was like, oh, it's to be all about sports, and it just kind of morphed into a show that was kind of about our lives. And yeah, we talked sports and all of that, but it was really kind of a show about us, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what I came to really take pride in the most about the show, is that when we got let go, you know, nobody said, hey, remember when you, I don't know, picked the Colts to go 12-4 and they went, you know, what they said was, we could tell how much that you guys loved Indianapolis and the people here. And that was what was important to me, because, you know, I'm not from here. Mm-hmm. And I know how important it is to people from here. People who aren't from here love it here. And I do genuinely love it here. And I love the people here, and I love the city. And you know, Jake especially, I'm not going to take credit for it. Jake especially, with his philanthropic causes and all of that, you know, we got to help people, like on the show, as stupid as it sounds, and fundraisers and things like that, and bring awareness to disadvantaged groups in the city. So, you know, that's kind of what I miss about it. Just that connection I feel like we had with people. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that we had some, and you know, we're the number one show or anything like that. We weren't, but the audience that we did have, like you and your dad, I feel like was really with us. You know what I mean? Like really hardcore and invested in the show. And we want.
Yeah, I mean, I can, like you talked about how interviewing guys like Peyton Manning, it becomes normal to you. I mean, all of my friends and people that follow me on like social media, they're always reaching out when I have guests on. Like I had Kyle Guy on, and everyone was like, "Oh my God, you got Kyle Guy," and I was like, "I mean, yeah, it's Kyle Guy." It's like it real like ever since I had Coach Painter on, who was someone that I've looked up to since I was 4 or 5 years old. That's how long he's been the Purdue coach. And then I had Mitch Daniels on a couple weeks after that. So everything's just kind of been starting to get normal to me, and I don't necessarily like that or dislike it. It's just kind of like it's really weird to think about. I'm talking to people that I've listened to since I could remember, and you and Seth Greenberg and all these different people that I've had on. It really is weird. So I understand where you're coming from that angle.
Yeah. Mark Boyle, who's the play-by-play voice of the best, where he said, these are just normal people with really cool jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the way that I've always looked at it. But, you know what I've come to find, and I always was jealous of Jake because I think Jake is one of the best. Jake's and he's one of the best interviewers I think out there. And I think what Jake is able to do is just talk to people like they're normal. And I think that's what they want. You know what I mean? Matt Painter, yeah, we would talk about Travion Williams and strategies and things like that. But when Matt Painter really lit up was when he got to talk about, like 1980s Cubs baseball. You know what I mean? Like that's what he likes. He talks basketball all the time. He talks Purdue all the time. All the interviews are all the same. It's nice for him to get on your podcast and shoot the breeze with somebody. You know what I mean? So that is, yes, there was an element of we have a job to do and we have to ask these things and get this information from, kind of making it conversational and connecting with somebody like they're a normal person. I've come to find that athletes and coaches really appreciate that.
Yeah, 100%. One thing I wanted to ask you was, obviously we're in the midst of this whole COVID-19 pandemic. I don't know when the heck it's going to end. Could be months, could be a year, who knows? But how do you think that the industry of sports media will be impacted by this going forward?
I think some of the changes that'll be permanent are have to do with availability. If teams know that just through Zoom, what's the point of having people there in person? The idea, and I have a lot of respect for beat writers and what they do, but to me, the idea of a antiquated, you know what I mean? Like the traditional beat writer, like what I was used to growing up was the beat writer was the one person you'd read it the next morning because you wanted to know what happened with the game. And now you get that game information anywhere. 100 different outlets will have something like that for you. So beat writers have now kind of morphed into doing like what the guys at The Athletic do. They do film reviews. They do a podcast. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of what it's become. And I think that's what we're doing here moving forward. I do worry about, kind of where we are for the sports talk format and just radio in general because of all the cuts that we've seen, newspapers, or smaller markets. But I do, in the offshoot from this, I do wonder if we're ever going to kind of get back to, hey, open locker room, come on in. You know what I mean? Like certainly time in 2021, even post-vaccine, you're probably talking about 2022, 2023 until we see something like that. And, this idea of having people in person for every press conference, like a lot of that stuff will probably shakes. I mean, there's just off the top of my head, those are the couple of things that really kind of jump out to me. But, what will remain for sports media is that if you're interesting and people care what you have to say, then those people are going to end up being fine. I think the stuff that's going to get kind of weeded out here is the real generic stuff. The people that tweet play-by-play on Twitter, like it's always the point, man. If I'm following you on Twitter, guess what? I'm watching the game. If I have access, if I can read your tweets, I can watch this game on my phone or on my iPad or whatever else. You know what I mean? Like, stuff like that. Like you have to be kind of unique. And there are a lot of people that are really talented that kind of are ahead of the curve and know how to do all of that. But, people will adjust. Things change, industries change, sports change. But I do feel like finally we're starting to see maybe the light at the end of the tunnel with positive vaccine news. And, man, what I really hope we get back to is the fan experience because there really is nothing like it. Being in being in a packed building where people are elbow to elbow for a big game, just the energy, it's really indescribable. It's hard to explain to people what that's like. I mean, I remember going down to Louisville for Purdue's regional game, game, and it was like it was a perfectly split 50-50 crowd, really, Purdue and Tennessee fans, and just the energy in that place, it was just amazing. And college atmospheres is what I really miss. I love pro sports. I love the NBA because it's played at the highest level. I get the most, I guess, enjoyment or, wow, holy crap moments from pro sports. But there's nothing that beats the atmosphere and the pageantry of a major college basketball game or a college football Saturday somewhere where, there's a lot on the line. Those atmospheres are second to none to me.
100%. I mean, just yesterday I was at McAfee for Purdue's season opener, and my first game I ever covered was last season against Iowa when we put up like 106, blew them out. One of the craziest games I've ever been to. And then to go to the game yesterday, no fans. It was just like, I think it was media. There was like 20 of us maybe sitting in the upper bowl, and then players' families. If they were able to make it, they could have come. And obviously not all of the players' families could come because they're all around the country. But the local ones did, like Brandon Newman's family and Eric Hunter's family and things of that nature. But it was just weird. And then Purdue was trying to pump in this crowd noise, and it was god awful. It sounded like someone was dying. It was terrible.
Yeah, it's been weird. It's I guess the new normal. And I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm not like one of those people that thinks everybody should put themselves in a concrete bar. But I do have a unique perspective of what's going on because, man, in March and April and May, I saw it every day, and kind of what my wife went through. And she goes through, an overnight trauma nurse in a major city. So, even when it's not COVID, it's gunshot wounds and all kinds of stuff that happens, and I've been a little bit uncomfortable and uneasy with the way that we've just kind of done full throttle in the head basketball and with the NFL. It's almost like we're so far into the season that nobody wants to stop, but it's, it's wreaking a lot of havoc. And it's really, I think, like what happened to Denver. I don't want to get too off track, but it's not even fair. You know what I mean? Like, it's not even, you're asking these teams to play and they've got to basically sign a guy off the street to come in and play. And, I don't want it to make a mockery of the competition. We are going to do it. But hopefully, like I said, this will be behind us soon and we can get back to some sort of normalcy. But I do think that it's going to be a while. I think it's going to be another year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. So one point that I wanted to jump back to was, what do you think about, like, I know radio is kind of, we're moving past that phase in terms of sports media, but then you look at guys like Pat McAfee. I watch his show pretty regularly. Do you think that could be more normal in terms of like that taking over the sports talk radio industry, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, really what Pat's doing is it's not that different from what you've seen major sports radio people do, like Colin Cowherd or somebody like that. But it kind of goes back to what I said earlier. If you're interesting and you're different and care what you have to say, you could do whatever the hell you want, really. You know what I mean? And that's basically what Pat has done in his post-playing career, whatever the hell he wants. And he's made himself into a brand. I mean, Pat McAfee is far more famous right now than he ever was as a punter. And he was a good punter. So I do think, you know what I do think what Pat has done, because he's kind of bounced around, I think what you'll see, instead of like what Jake and I did, we had contracts with iHeart Media.
Yeah.
We could only represent them. So there was nothing else that we could do. We were constricted to just representing them. I think what you're going to see in the future is everybody's going to be their own independent contractor. Where, if McAfee wants to do WWE, boom, I'm going to do WWE. I want to do a podcast, boom, there's a podcast. I want to do a TV show, boom, here's my TV show. Here's ESPN College Game Day. He does everything, right? Because he's not under any restrictions, and he doesn't represent any brand. We're talking about a very small amount of people that are able to get to where he's gotten and to be able to pull that off. But I do think that there's going to be a little bit of a ripple effect there. Like Lebitard, he's not for long, I don't think, with ESPN, because he knows deep down he can do his own thing and still make millions of dollars and have the entire audience, his hardcore listeners, follow him wherever he goes. And so I do think that that's kind of where we're going to go. And, what you've done with your podcast and just in general, this space where guys that haven't been hired by professional entities yet, and in some cases, like in your case, they're still in college, or in some cases even still in high school, are able to start a YouTube channel or whatever else. And, they're kind of setting the groundwork for all of that, because distribution isn't a problem anymore. 25 years ago, if you wanted a voice in a platform, somebody had to give you one. Now, all you need to go is go on to Amazon, get a $50 Bluetooth mic. There you go. You know what I mean? Get moving. Make your own show. And I like that. I've never been. Our bosses were really scared about that, especially corporate. It was really fearful. The fact that radio wasn't as relevant, but I like that because it makes everybody kind of step their game up, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean that's something that I've kind of thought about since Pat has gotten bigger. Is kind of doing something similar to him, but also doing things different. I think my favorite thing that I took from him is how diverse he is, and you kind of touched on it. So you talked about younger people that want to get into the sports media industry, I guess. Is there any advice that you would give those people?
Yeah, just don't try to be anything other than yourself. And it sounds like cheesy and corny, but it's hard for people to, younger people to kind of find their voice and decide how they want to tackle the whole thing. Like, they're passionate about sports, okay, but really at the end of the day, vehicle. But if you want to get to where you want to go, it's got to be centered around you, because anybody can talk sports. Even at this point with all 22 and everything like that, anybody can break down film.
Mm-hmm.
God, I mean, I watched I don't even remember what game it was. I think it was Russell Wilson and the Seahawks one game, and there was like this 15-year-old kid that was going through all of the Seahawks offensive packages. I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, he's like 15. Maybe not everybody can do it like that kid, but everybody at least has that understanding of that, or of sports themselves. That's not unique, but you're the only you. Like, only you have lived and experience, and your opinions based on that life experience. So tap into that. What makes you interesting, and what can people kind of connect to? What I always told, a lot of people, how much of that is real? What you do with Jake, and my answer was, well, all of it's real. Like, all of it is based in fact. Some of it is embellished to the 100th power. You know what I mean? But all of it's real. Like, I really did. In a high school wrestling match in an inter-squad scrimmage, I am deathly afraid of clowns and pelicans. That is true. But you just play it up because it's a show. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like we don't have a script, but it's a show. You're there to entertain and to have some back and forth and to kind of have some fun with it. So I'm really passionate about talking to young broadcasters, because I actually ran the internship program. In fact, I ran it for 1 year or 2 years at iHeart with all their stations. So Q95 and all of those. And I would interview and pick the interns and, coordinate their day-to-day duties. And people were You have to fill out their charts of what they're doing and go through resumes. And I was like, no, man, I was once that kid. You know what I mean? Like I'm passionate about helping people like that because I got a ton of help.
Mm-hmm.
A semi-decent career as like a D-lister, you know what I mean? Like a middle market AM radio co-host was my ceiling, but that's fine. You know what I mean? Like that, I did a lot of cool stuff. It was fun. So just finding being interesting, but at the same time, not forcing it and not trying to do what somebody else is doing, and not obsessing over what other people are doing. That's something that came as a hard lesson for me. Like when I was your age, all self-conscious about, oh man, like, this kid's got this internship and this guy's doing that and his podcast is this many, listens or whatever else. Don't worry about that. Just focus on you and put out the best product that you can and hone in on what your voice is, because you might not think you're interesting. You might think that you're boring as hell, but somebody else is going to find it interesting because it's different and it's not their life experience.
Mm-hmm. I found that to be true, especially like I know one other person with the podcast. Shout out to Jordan Jones, and he kind of made it his. I was kind of pushing him to make one, and he finally did. But all of my friends, none of them know anyone else who has a podcast, so it's kind of like I'm the person that they look to and they kind of rally around, I guess. But yeah, I mean, already I've been blessed with amazing opportunities, and I'm only 20 years old. I started this a year ago. And I mean, I've had the honor to talk to you, and I talked to Taylor Tannenbaum a lot, just about like the industry. And I don't know. So I kind of relate to you, like in that respect.
Yeah. And, Taylor is a great example who is interesting and puts her own spin on it, because TV especially, and I think even TV people would admit this, TV by far is the most generic of the sports medias.
Mm-hmm.
In a newspaper, like in a newspaper column, Greg Doyle has a lot of flexibility and free range to say what he wants and all that. On our radio show, we had complete creative control, which was awesome. Like we never had a manager or a boss or anything. Hey, you can't talk about this, or you've got to say that about whatever, even with our affiliations about Purdue or anything like that. With TV sports, it's so condensed because you only get like 3 minutes of airtime a lot of times in some of these packages. So to be, I think Clifford is another guy in this market that does a really nice job of being unique and putting his own spin on it. And we've also got some guys that have been in here for a long, long time that do a really good job. All of the sports directors, Chris Widlick at 4, Dave First, formerly at 6, now with IndyCar, AC at 8, and then Dave Calabro at 13 have all been stalwarts in the market as well. But I think, and I feel like for TV people, it's probably the most challenging too. And they've got social media, so they've got a way to kind of have their own voice that's off camera. But I think on camera stuff itself, that's probably the biggest challenge to kind of put your on it, because all of it and generic to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's something that if I'm lucky enough to do that, then I will. But that's not something that I really clamor for. Is to be on TV. I kind of just want to build my own thing, my own network. So I wanted to get to talk about some Indy sports. Obviously, the Colts had a tough game last weekend against the Titans. Got blown out. So what are your thoughts on that game and going forward?
Well, I'm bummed that I can't make Titans jokes anymore because, the Colts had owned them for so long that I always liked pointing out the fact that, Andrew Luck was undefeated against them. And I think at one point they were 23-3 in their 26 games against the Titans. I mean, they really just killed them. And now they've lost 2 straight in Indy, and I think they've split the last 6. So that's out the window. It's weird because you feel like that's not a performance that you should excuse. And Tennessee was shorthanded too. They were down to their third left tackle, and they didn't have all the bullets in the gun. And the lines aren't necessarily that good. Like their offensive line, their defensive line aren't that good. Yet they completely overwhelmed the Colts front. So that's where I was the most disappointed. But without Autry and without Buckner and without Costanzo for 3 quarters and no Kelly and no Taylor, I just don't think the Colts are good enough to overcome all those losses going in, that it was going to be kind of a tough ask for them. I didn't expect for them to almost get 50-burgered at home, but that could happen against a good team like Tennessee. I think the division is officially out now. So that's kind of where the Colts are in a tough spot with 5 to play for one of the wild card spots. So really the Colts at this point are playing for one spot, and that's the 6th spot. And you still have Pittsburgh. Houston is a much different than they have weeks ago. And Deshaun Watson always gives me a little bit of pause because to me, he's by far now the best quarterback. I guess I shouldn't say by far anymore, but he's still clearly the best quarterback in the division. So, it's a tough road ahead for them. I've always felt like this was going to be like a 9-ish win team. So 9-ish could be 8 and could be 10, right? I want to give myself some leeway there, mostly because I kind of had to talk myself into Phillip Rivers. I was completely out on Jacoby Brissett, so I was fine with them moving on from him because I just don't think Brissett is a starting caliber player. But Rivers was a guy that I was like, is he washed up? And he's been better than I expected him to be. And this Colts defense is terrific, but offense, big the run game just going into the hole. I mean, really, it was a great power rush offense last year with Marlon Mack and everybody in this offensive line, which was fully healthy. And now the O-line's banged up and regressing. And the other running backs haven't, risen to the occasion. So I think that's where they're really being held back, is the rush offense, more so even than Rivers, because Rivers is who he is. You can't ask him to do more than I think what he's done so far. Is going to be a playoff team. I never felt like this was going to be more than hey, get in, win one, pray to maybe win the divisional. But to me, this is the 2018 team. That's kind of how I feel like that's their ceiling. That's kind of where I've always felt with this team. I do hope they make the playoffs at the very least, because the worst thing to do is to go 9-7 and then miss, because then it's the ultimate waste of the season, because not only do you miss the postseason, you get the draft pick.
Yeah, I mean, and even if you do make the playoffs this season, there's no guarantee that the Steelers will be fully healthy with COVID and things of that nature. Like Big Ben could catch it, God forbid. I hope he doesn't. But I mean, anything can happen when it reaches January. So safe to say you don't think that this is a Super Bowl caliber team.
I don't, but to your point, single elimination playoff, anything is possible, right? We've seen a lot more chalk lately. I think last year was the first year where you didn't have a team in the conference championship game that had been. I'm trying to. You had like the top 2 seeds for a long time. Oh, I think what it was the first time you had somebody from Wild Card Weekend in Tennessee make the conference championship game in like 5 or 6 years or something like that. Whereas when you were growing up as a kid, when I was first getting into the business, the mid 2000s, you had the 6-seeded Steelers, both of those Giants teams, the Ravens in 12, like all these teams kind of came out of nowhere and made huge runs, and you haven't really seen that, but still single elimination playoffs. Anything's possible. The Steelers can be beat. Lamar Jackson, the MVP, and the Ravens got beat on their home field. So you never know. My point is, I'm not expecting it. Like if the Colts get in the playoffs, they win Wild Card Weekend. Then anything that happens past that is gravy.
Mm-hmm. I know we're kind of running out of time, but another thing I wanted to talk about was the NCAA tournament coming here to Indianapolis. How do you think that's going to play out in terms of where teams will be dispersed throughout the city and the state?
Sorry, you broke up there. Coming to Indianapolis and being dispersed throughout the city. Are you asking me about the venues or?
Yeah, about the venues. Like, where do you think that certain games could be played?
a lot of people had been like saying, hey, Southport Fieldhouse, and while that would be a lot of fun, you can't do it because the court regulation wouldn't work as neat as that would be. Stadium, but then I think Hinkle Fieldhouse absolutely is going to be one. I think they'll use the State Fairgrounds Coliseum. And me personally, because it's really not that far out of the way and they're really good venues, I think they're going to use them well, and have those be like maybe first 2-round sites. And then as you get, deeper in Sweet 16, Elite 8, then you move more centrally located, Hinkle, State Fairgrounds, Coliseum, stuff like that. I might be wrong. I've always kind of erred on the side of caution when it comes to that. So I don't think there will be fans, which I'll be really bummed about. But I am glad that at the very least the city showcase itself, and really under unique circumstances, it's probably one of the few places, maybe the only place, that could really logistically pull this off. Because yes, there are bigger cities than Indianapolis, but there's just no chance that New York or somebody like that pull something like this off without it just being a gigantic headache.
Mm-hmm. You kind of cut out for a second. I think you talked about 2 different sites that it could be at that were further away.
Oh, sorry. Mackey and Assembly Hall, I think, are going to be maybe in the first 2 rounds, I think, because they're so close. But as we get deeper into the tournament, I think it'll all be centrally located. Like I would expect Hinkle and the State Fairgrounds Coliseum to be involved. Obviously, the Final Four will be at Lucas Oil Stadium.
Mm-hmm. And I think you could honestly, I haven't been there in a while, but I was thinking about the convention center, kind of like how they did it in Orlando with the bubble, where they had a bunch of different courts. That's certainly a possibility too.
I was told a couple of months ago when they were thinking that the whole college basketball season was going to be a bubble and they regionalized teams, that they were preparing for that they were preparing the convention center for that, like courts and I just don't know logistically if they're set up and ready to go, but I would trust Indiana Sports Corps and the people that we have in this city when it comes to these events. They know what they're doing. They're a lot smarter than I am, so I wouldn't be surprised if they have the capability to do that at the convention center. But honestly, with Bankers Life and the Fairgrounds and Lucas Oil and Hinkle, I think you've got a good core 4 there. So, yeah, ballroom basketball was weird to me originally, but now, like, Battle for Atlantis and all that stuff, like, I'm used to it. Yeah. You know what I mean? It was no big deal.
Yeah. So last thing I want to talk about was IU and Purdue football, both on completely different trajectories. So how do you think each team would do before the season, and then what are kind of your thoughts now?
Before the season, I thought Purdue was going to have better record than Indiana because of the schedule. Because Indiana's crossover game, one of their crossover games to the West was Wisconsin. And then I was assuming that, Penn State wouldn't be mentally broken and Michigan, wouldn't fall into the curve that they've fallen into, and Michigan State too. So, I was thinking, I was really hopeful that Indiana was going to be able to follow up last year with another solid year. I was not expecting this. But then again, I wasn't expecting the Big Ten to stink like this.
Yeah.
Really is not close to as good as anybody thought that they were going to be this year. So it's been kind of a down year. Indiana doesn't have to apologize for that, but it's been kind of a down year. For Purdue, a lot of it was dependent on, is Rondale Moore going to opt in? And then once he opted in, I was like, oh, okay, well, I think, they could win 7 games or something like that. So that with this schedule. And of course it took a while for Rondale to come through, and now they've lost both games where he's in, but I'm thrilled for Tom Allen. The job, I was worried that it was going to be Bill Lynch all over again, where, nice guy, but in over his head on this level is better as a coordinator. You know what I mean? And he's proven me wrong and a lot of other people wrong, and people, his players. And it's great for me. Look, my rooting interests are basically gone now. I still kind of root for the Yankees. I've disowned the Knicks forever. The Giants aren't worth my time. But I grew up a really big IU basketball fan. My parents were IU alums, and then of course I went to IU, and my freshman year was their 2002 national championship game run with Jared Jeffries and Dane Fife and that group. But I was also an IU student during the Antoine Doyle era and then the Jerry DiNardo era, which was a disaster. So even though I don't really root, I root for everybody to do well. I'm an IU grad with Butler season and a Butler season ticket holder and worked for the Purdue. Like, I feel like I have my foot in all the camps. But as an IU alum, it is neat after being a national punchline forever. I mean, they were the worst major program in college football history for 120 years. And now to see them do this, I don't care if they're beating broken down Michigan State, Penn State, whoever. The context to me doesn't matter. What matters to me is that Indiana's ranked and 5-1. For Purdue, I'm really just surprised. Like, I still think, and I said this Twitter, I still think Jeff Brom is the guy. Like, I don't think that he suddenly forgot how to coach. I don't know how to diagnose what's gone wrong for them because they're 6-11 since he signed that contract. And to me, it's seemingly regressed after coming on the way that they did in the first 2 years. I mean, that was when Daryl Hazel left, you thought to yourself, okay, this is like a 3 or 4 year rebuild here. And they had immediate success. And then, of course, the time and everything, rallying from the 0-3 start, and then his story being so intertwined with that season was a special year, as special as a 6-7 football team is going to be. You know what I mean? Yeah. And for them to now be 4-8 to 2-3, and him to be making $6 million a year. I mean, he's not. There's no way that they're going to fire him because A, they shouldn't, and B, they can't. Purdue to loss and eat a deal like that. And a lot of the other stuff off the field has gotten better. The facilities are great. It's under Mike Babinski, and no offense to the late Morgan Burke, who was a nice guy and always was cordial with us. Some good things with Purdue athletics, particularly on the academic side of things. Morgan Burke was never interested in Purdue being a big-time athletic school. That's a fact. And Purdue fans deserved better than. And Mike Babinski, I'm not saying he's perfect, but Mike Babinski gets that. And they're never going to be Ohio State or anything like that, or Texas, or they'll never do that. But they needed to at least be an up facilities and spending, and clearly over the last, and to give Burke some credit, some of it started under his watch, but over the last 5, 6, 7 years to see Purdue athletics be made over the way that it did has been really exciting. But there was have to match on the field because we can sit here all we want and talk about the football center and the recruiting, and Rondale Moore might be a first round pick, David Bell might be a first round pick. Great. Well, if you're going 4-8, who cares? I'm just very disappointed, even with COVID and all this, and this season being kind of a wash. To lose to Rutger in year 3. I mean, it's an unacceptable me for a guy that's making as much as he is.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to learn a lot about Purdue in this next game against Nebraska. I mean, like you said, the Rutgers loss, totally inexcusable for a team as talented as we are. And then we're going to learn a lot about IU too, in my opinion. They play Wisconsin this weekend. If IU wins that, I'll tip my hat to them and say they're the real deal. But I've kind of had maybe it's because I'm a little biased, but I've kind of had my qualms about them, I guess, just because their wins really aren't impressive to me. They did play Ohio State very well, close, but I mean, that's just my opinion.
The thing about Indiana that has really been the revelation for me is they had better receivers and athletes on the outside than Michigan did.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Phil better than what Michigan had, and it's Michigan. You know what I mean? Like, I get that Harbaugh might get fired and they're in a rut right now, but it's crazy to me that, you know, when I was there, Antoine Randall was a pro, Levron Williams was an all-conference player. I'm trying to think. I think they had Chris Dealman maybe there, who had a long NFL career. You know, every once in a while you'd have like a pro player here or a first-round pick or something like that. Like Indiana's got talent all over the place, and that's what. Whereas you had Kellen Lewis and James Hardy for a couple of those teams, or, you know, Nate Sudfeld and Tevin Coleman. You know what I mean? Like every once in a while you'd have somebody like that. These guys that were real game wreckers, but Indiana's got matchup problems all over the place. But look, I can't defend the fact that the Big Ten stinks and Michigan is down. And I do think that Penn State mentally broke after losing the way that they did to IU. And so after starting 0-2, I just think that they disintegrated, and that's not necessarily Indiana's fault. But Wisconsin is still a good team, even with the COVID stuff that's really hit them hard. I'm still interested in the bucket game. I don't think that that's a lock Indiana win by any means. Because I'm kind of like with you. I think Indiana's overachieving a little bit to their level, and I think Purdue's underachieving to their level.
Mm-hmm.
When you even things out a little bit, there's not as much of a gap there.
Yeah, 100%. I'm going to have to wrap this up, but thank you so much for coming on. I mean, I've said it, but it really means a lot for you to come on after listening to you for 10 plus years of my life.
No, that's awesome, man. And that means, I can't even tell you how much that means to me, especially considering that I'm, you know, part time at Amazon. So for anybody to tell me that, you know, they think the show is cool or whatever else, that hits me in the sweet spot. But tell your dad I said hi too, and thank him for the support. And anytime you need anything, let me know. Because like I said, I'm helping young broadcasters, and I don't know, man. I don't know if you need much help. You seem to be on your way. So good for you. And thanks so much for having me on the show.
Yeah, for sure. I appreciate it. We'll talk soon.
All right, man.